Hi everyone, it's Hewett, an Executive Managing Partner at ChiuGroup, and we're back here today with another video on how to start a not-for-profit organization. Now, there are so many videos out there, or there are so many different blog posts and tips and hints on the internet about how to start your own nonprofit. So what we did is, from our own personal experience having started nonprofits ourselves, and from our experience working with our clients extensively on starting their own nonprofits, we put together what we believe are the core 8 steps that should be taken in order to strategically and intelligently form a not-for-profit organization. So let's take a look at what these steps are. So we put all these steps together in a checklist. We believe the first step is to first define the organization's mission, vision, and values. Then, to define the programs and activities that form the operating base of the organization. From there, develop goals and objectives. Then, putting it all together into a formal organizational and governance structure. Taking that and drawing out an operating framework from it. Developing a strategic plan, and only then will you have enough strategic information to incorporate the organization and to do all the other regulatory filings and paperwork that goes along with incorporation, like adopting formal policies and procedures, bylaws, and coming up with various organizational controls. And then finally, once the organization is incorporated, to apply for tax exemption status. So this is a checklist of the 8 steps. What I'd like to do now is take a look at each step in more detail. So let's start with step 1, which is defining the mission, vision, and values of the organization. Now, we've talked extensively about mission and vision in our other videos, particularly the video on a guide to social entrepreneurship. What essentially a mission and vision is, because many individuals, when they first start out, get these two terms confused. A mission statement is what particularly is the organization trying to do. So this is answering the question of what is the need that the organization is filling. The vision is what does the organization hope to look like, or how do you want the world to look like differently after you are able to do your work. Right, so those are 2 different concepts. Again, the mission is what are you trying to do, and the vision is how does the world look like after you're able to do your work. So it's extremely important, and we've talked about in some of our other videos the importance of having a strong mission statement, because a lot of different stakeholders look back to your mission statement in order to understand what the organization does, in order to support the organization, and to see if there's the right cultural fit of the organization. The IRS and the Attorney General's office, for example, looks at your mission statement in order to regulate the organization and in order to see if certain tasks or programs are within the scope of the organization. So it's actually extremely important, and in many sense, you can consider the mission statement a legal matter. The vision statement is important because it helps guide the organization. It sort of forms the end product or the end result for the organization. So it gives you a clear path to work towards in order to achieve your organization's goals. The values of the organization are basically the key tenets or principles that define how you operate the organization. What are your beliefs within the organization? So for example, if you say we value as a nonprofit transparency and accountability, how does that actually play out, and how is that operationalized in your day-to-day running of the organization? So your values help provide a stage for how you will act and how everyone acts within the organization. The next step is to define the programs and activities of the organization. So this is what exactly are you going to do? With the mission statement, you do a lot of research into what the community needs are that your organization will solve. With the programs and activities, now you're actually telling specifically what are you actually doing on a day-to-day level that you're going to help solve the need within the community. And you have to be really careful here with particularly the activities in your programs to make sure that they fall within guidelines and acceptability for tax exemption, which is the step later on. The third step is to develop goals and objectives. So now that you have a little bit of an idea of what are you trying to do, what's the need you're trying to fill, how do you want the world to look like after you're able to do your work, and what beliefs guide your actual work, now you're going to say, okay, let's lay out more concretely the timeline and what are the actual aims that we are going to achieve. So these are the goals and objectives. Goals tend to be broader and objectives tend to be a little bit more specific in helping you understand how are you going to reach your goals. So like for example, if you're trying to say we want to eliminate poverty, that could be a general goal that within this particular community you want to be able to eliminate poverty. But then you want to specify, okay, what does that actually mean by eliminating poverty? Is it, for example, by having 25% of individuals who are currently within the federal poverty level have higher incomes in the next 10 years? So that's an example of how specific you can be. And you can see that with more specificity, it gives you more sort of guidelines and more of a vision of, okay, how do I actually need to work now in order to achieve that specificity? Then you would develop your organizational structure and governance. This is actually quite important because many state laws require a certain minimum number of board members. So individuals who serve on the board of directors or a governing body of the organization in order to incorporate the not-for-profit. So before you actually jump into incorporation, you have to make sure that there is a well-defined structure in place. So how are your programs going to be run? Is it going to have certain program coordinators? Are there going to be frontline staff? And then on a higher level with the organizational governance, how many individuals will be serving on your board of directors? Who are the different individuals and what are their skill sets and capabilities and capacities that they bring into the board? How do each of their particular contributions add value to the organization as a whole? So these are just some questions to consider. After that, the next step is to developing the operating framework. So this is basically the model by which you're going to enact and implement your programs. Right, so before we've defined the programs and activities, we developed the actual goals and objectives that we want to meet. And now this is the vehicle by which you're going to enact those programs and activities. So for example, are you going to have, through having an organizational structure in the previous step, are you now going to be able to have program coordinators that will be responsible for the entirety of a particular program priority area within the organization? And is that program priority area going to be implemented on a community-based grassroots level, or is it going to be on a national policy level through lobbying, for example, right? So these are just the different ideas and examples of frameworks that you can adopt and think through in understanding how your nonprofit is going to be operating. The next step is to then develop a strategic plan. So this is figuring out what are the particular resources that you need. This is putting basically everything together that in the previous steps that you've developed into a cohesive, living, breathing document that will guide you in actually doing. So using resources as an example, the strategic plan helps you answer questions like, what's the startup capital that I need? What are the human capital, the human resources that I need? How do I actually achieve my goals and objectives 5 years down the line, 3 years, down the line, or even next year? What are we actually doing and how do we do it in order to achieve our vision, right? In order to fulfill our mission and achieve our vision, right? So that's really what a strategic plan centers itself around. After having a strategic plan, then we recommend entrepreneurs to start the incorporation process. The reason for that is because while you can file for incorporation, having a very distinct and clear idea of what the organization is trying to do and how the organization will actually do it will make the process so much easier, right? Because you actually have the proper language and rhetoric to include in your certificate or article of incorporation. you would also already have a lot of the deliverables that you need for subsequent filings as well. And so along with incorporation, you would also perform the other internal governance procedures, like adopt corporate bylaws, have written consent of the board of directors, adopt conflict of interest policies, adopt a whistleblower policy, adopt financial controls, and all the other administrative procedures you need. And then after the incorporation is when you would apply for tax exemption status. So there's tax exemption on the federal level with the IRS, and then there's tax exemption on the state level. So that's for state sales tax, that's for various different types of local municipal taxes depending on your particular jurisdiction as well. So this is the last step in our 8-step process. These are basic general guidelines that should apply broadly to everyone. Now, as always, with all of our videos, we like to add a little be careful slide towards the end of the video so that we can convey certain lessons that we've learned from our own experience so that you won't have to go through the same complexities as we have from our experience, and just sort of as a point of being a little bit more helpful. So the first item to be careful of is overly aggressive projections. It's really, really easy when you first start off as an entrepreneur to say, oh, we want to eliminate poverty and eliminate all the disparities in the healthcare system in the next 5 years, because 5 years sounds like a lot of time and you're able to do a lot of things in 5 years, right? But at the same time, you have to balance that with being realistic. As an example, in filing for tax exemption, the IRS will ask you what are your 3-year projections, right? And so you want to be very, realistic with what exactly are you doing, and does this make sense in the context of what you're doing? The next thing to be careful of is over diversification. What I mean by that is, let's say your mission statement says, let's just continue with the poverty example, and just run with it. So let's just say your mission is to help eliminate poverty, right? And to do that, there are so many different things that you can do, right? You can help with housing and homelessness, you can help with transportation problems, you can help with food insecurity problems, but a strong nonprofit will not try to do everything, right? You can't do everything to everyone, right? You want to make sure that you choose what you're good at and what you really want to do, what you have experience doing and what you have the expertise to do, and develop your expertise in that area. The next item to be careful of is sustainability and scalability. So this is making sure from the beginning that whatever your programs and activities are that you're hoping to do, that you can actually sustain them in the long run, and that you can grow them at a reasonable rate, right? In many ways, if you think about it, a not-for-profit organization is a public charity, right? You're taking funding from the public, that's what donations are, and you're putting them into operations for the betterment of society. Because you're taking in public funding, you need to be very careful and hold yourself to that much of a higher accountability standard, right? If you think about it, no donor wants to give money to a nonprofit that 3 years later will fold up its operations because they can't sustain themselves, right, and go bankrupt. Same thing in the private industry with investors. So we want to make sure that there is a thoughtful process for the nonprofit to still remain running and to continue to grow its operations in the long term. And then finally, be careful of fundraising. Many nonprofit entrepreneurs think from the beginning, oh, as long as we get our tax exemption status, we're good because we're a nonprofit and the donations will start coming in. Right? It's not as easy as that. Just because you're a not-for-profit organization with a tax exemption determination from the IRS does not mean that funds will just come in. It's a lot of work, especially with grant making and government contracting and all these other different fundraising opportunities, even with fundraising events, right? You have to build up that initial support network from the beginning. So you have to be really careful and, again, realistic, right? So this goes back to being overly aggressive with your projections. So you have to be realistic with how much funds can you actually raise and can that sustain, right? So that's going back to sustainability and scalability. And so can those funds sustain the programs and operations at the level that I intend so that I can achieve my mission and work towards my vision. Right? So that's sort of how everything fits together. Now, those are the 8 steps, and these are some 4 cautions to think about when starting off with developing your not-for-profit organization. I know that as we went through those steps, there were certain concepts that came up that you may not be familiar with, or that may not be entirely clear to you from the very beginning. And so if you have any outstanding questions or lingering questions, or if you just want a sounding board to think about your ideas with, you can feel free to contact me. My contact information is right here on the screen. If this is your first time here looking at our videos, please subscribe to our channel. There are a lot more videos to come about nonprofit development, social impact ventures, and entrepreneurship. Please like and comment on this video. I'd love to continue the conversation with you outside of this video and learn more about what you're doing. And thanks very much for watching.